working with you on your specific needs. So the morning and up to the last session was giving you a lot of information. Now it's your turn. So before you settle down, does anybody want to come up to the second and third rows? Come down? Okay. you're already down. But people at the back, so it's easier for us to have a conversation. It's not going to be a formal presentation. We will present some stories. We have two panelists, who are students like you, to share their experiences. And I'm going to consolidate what they say with your questions and comments. And building off what Lisa said earlier, we're all in this room, and we have different questions. And for each question that we have, there might be people who have some things they're doing that address those questions. So I'd like to crowdsource the session a little bit and have you contribute, which is why if you want to come down, this might be a nicer, more intimate conversation. But if you're comfortable where you are, then just be there, right? So before we begin with the two panelists, before I introduce them, I'd like to start by recapping a little bit. You got a lot of information this morning, right? You got lots of stories. You heard very many useful things. And one of the themes that I noticed was trying to kind of like synthesize stuff this morning. But I'd like to ask you, what were some of the repeated themes, ideas that you think you heard this morning a few times? It came up. Takeaway for you from this morning. What were some of the things you heard? Yeah.
Collaboration,
Community, right? Crowdsourcing your support. Yeah, that was one of the themes.
Know yourself well enough to know whether you need external motivators and then create those structures.
Know yourself, very ancient message, right? Because from that comes everything.
I think I would say never forget you're a student. You know, no matter, you may be a teacher, you may be a parent, and all of those things might have to come first sometime, but you can never forget that you're a student, because the minute you do that, you're not.
Right.
You know, you get derailed.
Yeah. Professor Tariq Azam talked about that idea of prioritizing what's important, what's urgent. And I love the irony of what he said. Because we have control of it, we can put it aside. Right? The one thing that you have control of. So, yeah, those were some of the themes. And the topic for this session is managing your scholarly process. And I have lost, no, I haven't. I want us, as we listen to the two panelists, we're going to keep it informal, right? They're just going to share their stories, and then we'll have a conversation about their stories and how they map onto your own stories, and come up with some principles and strategies. But I want us to think about shift in your mind from managing to leading. How do you lead your own process? And what you said about remembering that you're a student. And then, very important, because sometimes this way lies sanity. How do you balance it? Right? So this is what the focus is going to be. Managing, leading, balancing. So I'm going to introduce our two panelists and let them tell you their stories. And what we're looking out for is look for points of connection when you hear what they're saying. How is their experience a little bit like yours? But especially look for points of difference. How is it different to yours? And how does that difference speak to you? Does it give you some insight? Does it raise questions? Because we would like to hear those insights and questions answered. And then when they're done, we'll have a conversation, all of us, and try and build some strategies together. The reality check here is that, there isn't a single 10-step plan. Go out and do this and manage your scholarly process. What it is there are some fundamental principles that we're looking for today. If we build those, you can apply them to your own process and customize for what you need. Our panelists are current students, just like you, going through the dissertation process. invited them because we felt they have stories that are valuable to hear and to share. And they're going to just tell you how they're doing it, right? What they're doing, what they wish they had done, so that you can take those ideas in and see how they fit into what you're doing. And we have Shelby Hamm, who is in the School of Religion. I'll let them say more about who they are when they talk. I'm going to give you names. And Manny Diaz, who is in Education and Cultural Studies. And I'm just going to ask Manny to talk to us. All right.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
I can't hear you.
Hi.
As Shamini described, I'm Manny Diaz. I'm a third-year PhD student in education. And I'm finding myself awkwardly situated at the end of my doctoral tenure in terms of coursework. I feel like I'm in a particular place in my journey here. I've navigated the program quite quickly as a result of multiple things that I will share with you. But I think really the common message that I've got is that I have the power to influence my progress here, right? And in many ways it's been a very personal journey for me. It's also been very scary and somewhat difficult as well, as I'll share with you in a little bit. As this is my last semester of coursework, I couldn't be happier. How many of you feel that way? Yay! Like I said, it's a beautiful process, but at the same time, it doesn't get any easier from what I gather, right? There is no time frame to go to class now. Everything is based on my progress and my ability to make progress, right? So I'm finding a little bit of a challenge with that right now. But how is it that I have balanced multiple responsibilities? I think of the work-life and academic balance, which is all interconnected to some point, and it's difficult being a student, right? Finding time for myself in terms of writing. When do I write? Do I write better in the morning? Do I write better in the afternoon? Do I write better in the evening? For me, what has helped me propel forward is having an agenda for myself, carving out times of writing blocks in the morning or other in the evening, and I find that I write better in the morning. I like to think that I'm well rested, but I'm not really. So that's one strategy that has worked for me, and also teaching, balancing the needs of my students, and having to juggle multiple responsibilities there as a student scholar myself, right? And I think somebody had mentioned it previously, is that I want to do all of these things, and that's great and exciting, but at the same time I have to remember that I'm still a student. My academics come first, and until this semester is over, then I can move a little bit quicker through my professional self. Also self-care. What do I do for self-care? For me, that's yoga, exercising, sleep, which I don't get too much of, but it's about maintaining a balance for myself that has helped me a bit. Socializing with family. There have been many times where I haven't seen family in 2-3 months as a result of having to do homework, do reading, writing, whatever it may be, and coming from a Latino background, my family doesn't always understand that. It's been quite an experience having to explain that to them as a first-gen student as well, right? Having to work harder or twice as hard as a student of color to get to where I want to be. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. At the end of the day, I think for me it's about maintaining and being cognizant of how I maintain my time. Right? Prioritizing my time, being intentional with my time, how I progress forward, what's best for me, what doesn't work for me, finding a routine, a schedule, right? So how is it that I manage to maintain balance and keep my sanity? Well, like I mentioned before, I want to do everything, and while that's the beauty of this process, I'm realizing that I'm not Superman. I can't do everything. I would love to, but at the end of the day, I have to learn, or I have learned the hard way to say no, and that's been difficult. And really another thing that's been fueling my drive to just be done is that I'm ready for this journey of my life to be over. Well, as previously mentioned, it's been a beautiful process, and I've had great relationships here with colleagues and faculty and staff, I'm ready to be done. I'm ready to get out. I don't want to be a student very much longer. I have very little energy left. If that sounds a little bit selfish. So what are my sources of strength? How many of you are familiar with the imposter syndrome? Yeah. Even sometimes working in student affairs with my students, I often question, can I do this? Is this what I really want to do? Do I have the self-efficacy to believe that I can do this? At the end of the day, I do. I make things bigger than what they really are, and I think that's transparent. That's been a common theme throughout my academic tenure in graduate school thus far. Also, what are some other strengths that I draw on, especially in particular with my writing? How many of you feel like you can improve your writing or struggle with writing? I know I still do. It's somewhat of a challenge for me. But learning and drawing back to my previous research training as a McNair scholar, I look back on things that I've written and I often am in awe of, did I really do that? So I keep reminding myself that I do have the tools, I do have the support, and I do have the resources here at CGU, evidenced by scholars, faculty, staff, mentors, whomever it may be, right? And one thing that's very near and dear to me that keeps moving forward is being a role model to my students. I often think that I can tell them to do this and to do that, but can I take the advice myself, right? And be an advocate for them and for their educational success. And also, I've learned to become vulnerable and recognizing that I don't know everything about anything, and I probably never will, right? There's always this need to keep learning and constantly learning because there's always a need. Things are always changing, right? Also, one thing that I also want to mention is organization has been half the battle for me. My MBTI is ISTJ, and I keep reminding myself to use that as an advantage to maintain structure and organization. But it's also the weakness as well, in terms of rigidity and flexibility. One important thing that I do want to say is my advisor has been a driving force for me in my education here at CGU. I'm very thankful for the relationship that we have, and she's provided great opportunities for me, TA opportunities, references, whatever it may be. And sometimes having that difficult conversation with your advisor is the one that needs to happen, right? Being very transparent and being very honest about what you want, what you don't want, what you want to do, what you have time for, what you can and what you can't do. Have that heart-to-heart conversation, and I'm very happy with that relationship that I have here. Also mentioned an agenda to meet my dissertation committee members and keeping them in the loop. I don't want to have to jump through 20 groups when I only have to jump through one. So that's something that's keeping me on track thus far. If there's anything that I wish I had known earlier in my program, is that one thing that I'm mindful of is every paper that I write for every class should be a smaller component to your proposal for your dissertation. For me, I see that as a framework for grading my writing success here and how I write things and how I prepare forward. That's been a very positive thing to keep in mind. Again, writing every day, making time for self-care, because if you don't take care of you, really, I don't think anybody else will. And I've learned that the hard way. And lastly, again, recognizing and going back to the common theme is that absolutely, that I can't do everything, and that it's okay to be selfish with my time sometimes, but also to remember to engage in self-care.
Thank you.
There were lots of things there in Manny's experience that I hope, resonated with you. Maybe you have questions about. We're going to hold those just for a little bit and hear another story, and then we'll have time for questions and conversation. So, Shelby.
Can everybody hear me in the back? I tend to yell, actually, so probably not a problem. This is going to be a little uncomfortable for me, actually, because I'm going to admit some stuff in here that I hate for people to find out about, because we really try and keep this persona of like, I've got everything going, everything's good. Somebody asked me how my research, good, great, it's good, I'm making progress, right? So I am in the religious studies program. I've finished my coursework, but I haven't taken my quals yet. jobs, I work 30 hours a week, and I'm also planning my wedding. So I'm going to talk about life balance today. So I actually finished my coursework a while ago. And what happened was, honestly, I got lost. I was like, I finished my coursework, that's all I know how to do. I went to school, I went to classes in high school. Undergrad, you took classes, masters take classes, PhD, you take classes. And so when I was done with that, I was like, oh, okay, I know I'm supposed to do my quals. I have all this time now. Like, that's great. I'm going to get more jobs, which is what I did. I picked up another job. And I just kind of floundered for a while. I was like, I'm just kind of doing this thing. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. But now I think I'm good. So I haven't taken my quals yet, but now I'm actually making progress. And I'm going to tell you guys what actually made the difference for me. And hopefully you can take something away from this. What I did might not work for you, but hopefully you find something useful. So one thing I want to talk about is, I call it grad school guilt. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I can work all day and then go home and want to watch a Netflix show, and I feel guilty the whole time because I'm not working.
All of us.
Has anyone experienced this? Raise your hand. Okay. So for balance, I found that when I experience grad school guilt, it actually gets to a point where I kind of shut down and I don't want to do anything, so I procrastinate, and then I feel more guilt, and then I procrastinate. It's just like an awful cycle, it really is. So I don't feel that way very much anymore. And here's what I did. I'm in grad school, I researched on it. I was like, I see people that don't have this problem. My professors are doing great. There's people that are successful. What are they doing that I'm not doing? Because I want to have balance and I want to make progress. So I researched it. I talked with other students that were successful. I talked with faculty. I read blogs about productivity. I read books about how to be successful at graduate school. I watched YouTubes on how to control stress. And so for I want to say 2 months, I was like, all right, I'm turning my life into an experiment. I'm going to try everything. And my fiance is in the room. And I think she was frustrated with me by the time this was over, because I talked about it all the time. But so I implemented systems like the GTD. I don't know if you guys Getting Things Done by David Allen. I actually didn't like it. I also read articles like 10 simple ways to make yourself insanely productive, and then tried to implement those things. So what I discovered from my months of research and testing, there's a lot of bad advice out there for grad students, because what we're doing is weird. It is not like other jobs. You don't have a 9 to 5 where you can go in, go out, and then you're done for the day. And you're done, you can go be whatever you want. You can go relax and stuff now. And it's not just that, we don't have deadlines like that anymore. So it's you don't have to you don't have a meeting, you have to present on your stuff by a certain time, whatever. So it's, your end projects take a long time to complete. We're taking months to complete a project. How do you feel like you're making progress? It's different than all of those help books really say it is, in my opinion. And a lack of accountability, we talked about that today. So what good advice did I find? I literally broke it down into 4 things that work for me. So I'm going to list them and then I'll go over and tell you what it is for me. One is prioritize deep work every day. Okay? I'll explain later what exactly that means too. Is count the days of success if you meet this one goal of working deeply every day. 3 is have the same schedule each week as much as possible. There's always going to be flexibility, and then 4, take real time off. So what I mean by number 1 is deep work. There's 2 different types of deep work, and I'm getting this from Deep Work by Cal Newport. If you haven't read it, which probably no one in here has because he just wrote it, read it. I mean, it really made a huge difference for me. He's a professor at Georgetown University. He's a New York Times multiple bestseller. He's a blogger, and he's a computer theorist at, so he's good. So one of the things deep work is this is what he calls it: professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to the limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. So this is working for a chunk of time, interrupted on one task with a lot of concentration. That means, this is the stuff that's scary, that's hard, that you want to run away from. This is the very thing that we probably aren't working deeply on. So it's, and when you do work like this, you can produce quickly, so you're going to get through your program more quickly, and it's going to be higher quality. And so I'm going to tell you what shallow work is, and this is where I was working from. I was working from shallow work, so that means like non-cognitively demanding logistic-style tasks performed while distracted. And I mean like any sort of distraction, multitasking, anything like that. So this is working on a paper with Netflix in the background. This is working at your computer with your phone sitting beside your computer, and you see notifications for your email, you see text notifications, you see your Facebook thing pop up. This is, if you see yourself like reading the same sentence over and over, this is the kind of work you're doing. I was feeling like I was working. Like I work a couple hours a day, but I didn't feel like I was making any progress. This is kind of what I'm talking about. And also just switching back and forth. So I would answer an email and then go back to reading the article I was reading, before. Switching tasks like that. So really, I think deep work is one of the most important things that we do in this career. This is the stuff that's going to, it's going to help you get done. And it's the hardest, because when you sit down to write whatever the thing is, your dissertation or your thesis or whatever, it's the thing where like suddenly, you need to clean your house. Suddenly, that email is really important. And so while you think you have actually sat down and worked 2 hours on something, when you actually think about it, how much time did you spend getting cognitively just into the work? And then how much time were you spent doing other activities so when you do this, shut down your phone, turn off your notifications, don't have TV going in the background. I know it's hard to do, but like that's really important. Read his book. I think it'll make a huge difference. And it has to be one thing. Don't sit down and be like, oh, I'm just going to work on my dissertation right now. It needs to be really specific. It's like, I'm going to sit down and work on chapter 2, section whatever on my dissertation for 3 hours. And it needs to be a significant chunk of time. And that's what helped me. And it was doing it every weekday. That means 5 days a week. I would sit down for 3 hours and work. Now, minus 3 hours, you can do more or less, whatever you want. But this is like real work, sitting down for 3 hours and hashing that out. Now, there's other things on the side that you need to do. You need to be keeping up with conference call proposals and stuff like that. But this is your priority. So it's that urgent but not important but not urgent category. This is it. And every day I would write down the one task I was going to work on for the day. And if I completed that task, I counted it as a successful day. And then I could forgive myself later in the day for watching Netflix or whatever. So you really have to defend this time, by the way. We have tons of meetings, we have other commitments. You have to defend this time. And I like to schedule it every week at the same time because everybody knows I'm unavailable at that time. It doesn't have to be the same day, but during the week it's the same schedule because that's what grad school kind of goes off of. And it's automatic too, it's this ritual. I know I'm going to go to this place and I'm going to work for 3 hours. There's no talking myself into it or deciding like, today I think I'm going to go to Starbucks instead. Yeah. And then once you have to like cognitively think about like, okay, well, what am I going to do? You're wasting willpower right there. It's taking more than just it being a ritual that you just do automatically. So I have a schedule like that. And then I have 2 more things. So one is after I'm done with it, I decide what I'm going to do next time. So after my 3 hours are up, I write down what I'm going to do next time. So next time I don't come in and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? Actually this other thing sounds more fun today. No, I've already written it down the day before what I'm going to be working on. And that helps me keep on track. And then the last thing is So this means when I'm done working on my deep work for the day, and I've done whatever other things I need to, because that's just 3 hours a day. It's really not that long. I really take time off. This doesn't mean social media. I know a lot of people that use social media as time to relax. It's really not. Look at the research on social media. You actually get more emotionally stressed out. It's not relaxing on your system at all. It's actually like getting a hit of a drug. So do something else. Go outside and walk. So I take the weekends off, and I'm making lots of progress. I completely take the weekends off from work. And this might not be feasible for some people, but I think for most people it is if you make it a priority. On Saturdays, I go hiking for long periods of time with my dogs and my fiance, and we talk. And we don't talk about work. We talk and just be outside. Be in a place that reminds you that there's an outside world. And then on Sunday, I get ready for my next week. This means I go grocery shopping, I plan out what I'm going to cook for the week, I clean my house, and on the weekends I also spend time with friends. So completely disconnect. I think it's really important we forget about that. You can't go 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and expect to be refreshed and come back with new ideas. Your subconscious needs time to process what you're working on, so you can come back with fresh ideas. So that's it. Those 4 things. Prioritize deep work every single day. Read that book by Cal Newport. Count each day as a success if you meet this one goal. If you work for 3 hours or however long on your most important but not urgent task. And then have the same schedule each week. Make it a ritual, make it easy to do, and then take real time off. Those are the things that worked for me, and it took me a while to figure that out. But like I said, now I'm actually making progress and moving quickly, and I think it's sustainable for the long term. I'm not just talking about grad school, I'm talking about work in the long term. I'm not going to burn out, I'm going to keep going, and I can get done pretty quickly. And I'm maintaining like 30 hours a week work schedule, planning a wedding. I mean, it's working for me. So I hope you guys got something out of that. Thank you.
When both Manny and Shelby were speaking, there were a lot of visceral, physical responses, right? Identifying with things. What we want to do now is maybe re-articulate it in your own words. Like some of the ideas you heard from them, and I'm going to put it on the whiteboard. Some of the ideas you heard from them that resonated with you. Once we've done that, I'd like to do some crowdsourcing. You are all here with strategies that work. You're also all here looking for more strategies that work. So this process hopefully will give us a really good bunch of things to pick and choose from. So what are some of the things you heard that you really liked? Yeah.
This is a comment, but also a question for you both. Shelby, I loved what you said about having a ritual where you know where you're going to be, you know what you're going to be doing. Sometimes, little about me, I tend to flip out over things that I do like every day, like having to sit down and just overcome the inertia to start writing. So sometimes I have to like play a little mind game with myself where I'm like, okay, I'll set a timer for 15 minutes and then I can have a break. But once you're on a roll, then you kind of feel better. Do you have startup rituals like that help you overcome the inertia or the panic that you feel, knowing that you're going to sit down and you're going to do something that's cognitively demanding and that is going to require your entire focus, and you're not going to, be goofing around with half your mind somewhere else? Do you have like triggers that get you into that headspace, or things that you do to transition into that deep work?
I definitely do. So actually, it's a very specific ritual, and I actually developed this trial and error. But I take out a notepad, and so what I do at the top is I just start listing. This might not help you guys, but it helps me. All of the to-do tasks I have for the day. It's actually a little bit stressful, but also a little cathartic. So like random stuff, like I need to send so-and-so an email, I need to do this, I need to call and talk to the caterer, like all these things, and I just write it all down. And then at the bottom of that list, I actually go back and see what I need to do on my priority tasks for the day, write that down, and then I write down, so I usually work at about 1. So like 1 to however long I'm going to be there, that's my last task that I write down, and then I start on it. So that allows me to see, yes, all this other stuff is going to get done, but for this chunk of time, this is what I'm working on, and the other stuff will get done. So it's not like rattling around my head, because a lot of times I notice that I'll stop a task, or I'll stop working, if like something pops in my mind, like, oh man, I need to do X, you know? So if I can just sit down and brainstorm that out first, it lets me just kind of dump it out on the page. That's what I do to get started.
How many of you do something like that? Great. It really works, just getting it out of your head, like you said, not rattling. So you think of it as download it, then it's on the side. It also works when you're writing and the thought comes, I need to check this reference, just write it on the side, carry on. Yeah.
I think that there's also something to be said about having small goals and like little things that you were able to check off as you go, like to feel successful throughout your day.
Right. Break it down, having small goals. Right. Okay, what else resonated? Yeah, over here, then we'll go to the back.
Self-care, actual self-care.
Actual
I thought I was practicing it before, but I really had to learn it in this process. Actual self-care. I mean, that's
I like the distinction made between relaxation and restoration. Where do you get your energy from, right? Maybe not by going into Facebook. Yeah. Comment on it?
I was really resonating with the idea of like what counts as a success, because some days on days that look objectively like they've been successful for me, I don't feel successful because maybe I haven't, like my final product doesn't feel very good, or like I messed up my stats analysis and I have to do it again even though I did a lot of work on it. So the idea that like if you work for 3 hours, it's a success no matter what.
Yeah, because sometimes, like, I'll end up sitting there deleting, like 1,000 words that I wrote 3 days ago because I'm editing my paper because it's over the word count, right? So I'm like literally undoing the work that I spent time on. But it's a success because it needs to be done. And it was really important for me not to be down on myself, to be able to say like, okay, this is good. And some days it's just like, I'm just brainstorming. I didn't actually produce anything.
Yeah. And then we'll go to the back.
I really like this idea of deep work, and I'm intrigued on reading more about that. Something that I was doing a lot of was being really busy with like little tasks and all these things, so that I could feel like, see, I'm working, I'm productive, I have all these other things to do. I'm not just, how can I prioritize quals or this dissertation when I've got all these other things I need to do? And so I just really like this idea of being able to set all that aside in some way and just really preserve and defend a time and a space that you're going to do this deep work that takes concentration and an ability to clear your mind of these other things in some way. So I think that that's something that I definitely want to get better at.
I think we have that problem a lot, is the busyness versus actually getting quality work done. It's really easy. When I send an email, I feel like I accomplished something. Even though like the email means nothing, right? It's not helping me get a PhD, but it's really hard because, and it happens in my jobs too. Like, I feel like I go to work and then like I've accomplished something at work, and then I feel like, oh, I did stuff today, but I have to actually take a step back and be like, that's not helping me get my PhD. It's hard to do that.
And I think part of that is because of the visibility. The immediate work is very visible. And I wanted to say something before we go to the question at the back. One of the ways I really struggled with this when I was doing my PhD, and I learned from someone to log what I was doing. You can set goals and then you get really down on yourself as, well, I didn't meet that, I didn't write 20 pages. But if you start logging, especially if you're also doing this deep work, which is a kind of chunking what you want to do, I'm going to do this today, I'm going to do this tomorrow. By the end of the week, if you've actually logged it, written it down somewhere, it becomes visible, just like the short-term things are so obviously visible to you. And I began to realize, well, I did work, instead of this is never getting done, because you keep doing it and it keeps going to an endless hole.
The PhD hole.
all. Especially with quals and when you're doing that research, the endpoint is very nebulous. So yeah, logging it is an idea that I had that I thought I'd share with you.
Just a little nugget. I've done some research on this area too, and one thing that I found, I love the idea of like 3 hours of deep work, but I found that if you actually take 45-minute chunks out of an hour and say like no email, no Facebook, no nothing for 45 minutes, I'm gonna read this article, one article, and actually like get through it and focus, and that's it. And then at 45 minutes, I'll check my email, I'll get that social media hit, whatever it is, I'll take a lap, I'll take a walk, whatever. And then you do another deep dive for 45 minutes. Like there's evidence to suggest that we can't actually focus for that long. And so I find that it actually helps me hold off on like checking that email and getting started. It's like, I could do 45 minutes. Like that's actually reasonable. And so
Doable, right?
taking even like the 3 hours and saying like little chunks of time to just focus has been really helpful.
Can I respond to that real quick?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I know I'm like responding to everything, but so Cal Newport's book actually talks about this, and he says actually that's where most people have to start. We don't have especially in our day of cell phones and everything else, we don't have the cognitive strength to concentrate for that long. But you can get to a 3-hour point.
Right.
So if you do the 45-minute chunks and slowly like start lengthening them, you can get to where you will not check your email, you will not check Facebook, and it will be like a really solid 3-hour chunk. And I had to start at a lower time too, and I'm pretty good at getting almost, or at least 3 hours in pretty well.
That's awesome.
So like it is something that we have to work with and don't automatically have, especially nowadays, I think.
I think to support that, I think it's really on the topic of know thyself, is what time of the day you're scheduling this deep work for. Like for me, getting up is so hard in the morning, but if I get out of bed and somewhere quiet by 8 a.m., the work that I'll do from 8 to 11 a.m. is what I do from like 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Like my brain is firing, so like, but I often make the mistake of scheduling meetings and all this kind of stupid stuff during my time when my brain is most productive. So I think protecting your peak brain functioning time, whatever that is for you, is super important.
Can I say something? So those of us who are working, sometimes it's a bit challenging, right? Your peak time is, but it never hurts to ask. I had a colleague here who spoke to her boss. So sometimes the boss will just look at you like, I don't know, no. But she managed to negotiate something so that for a certain period of time, the door was shut and everybody in the office knew she was working on her dissertation. They really wanted her to finish. So depending on your community, it never hurts to explore those options. A comment over there, and then a comment over here, and then a comment over here. Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the kind of connecting themes that I'm hearing is this notion of guilt versus vulnerability, what Manny was saying. And I think it relates to, I think the first session when we were having the faculty speak, and this idea, you know, that we're supposed to have it together. And so when we go to the faculty, we're, you know, like, look, my whole dissertation is done. You know, and what I heard was this sense like, you know, they're not there just for that, but that they're there to process with you and to mentor you. And so I think what I'm hearing in this kind of conversation is that, not kind of specific, like, you know, to conceptualize this as a journey of being in process. And I think that, like what Sean was saying, this deep work reminds me that why I'm here is this idea of learning for myself and then to, you know, learn, to know that I'm teaching others. But I think learning is the process of that kind of deep work. So I think maybe to conceptualize this as like, you know, oh my God, I gotta get 3 hours, but it's like, actually, I'm here to kind of learn something and actually be vulnerable because I don't really know, and maybe that might make this process of sitting for 3 hours less intimidating because I have to come being vulnerable, right? And maybe I might learn something today. That might be something exciting.
we allow vulnerability, maybe the guilt is not.
Yeah, exactly.
Those two are intention, right? We have Frank and then.
I also really like the idea of concentration because based on my philosophy, concentration produces efficiency automatically. When we're concentrating on our work, we'll surely produce very high quality work in a short period of time. But in order to be fully concentrated, we need to have a good environment. So I recommend our future students to go to the library to study our research, especially the third and fourth floor, very quiet environment. So it will help you be very completely concentrated on your work and produce very high efficiency.
I think that's a very important point. Where is your optimum space? And we have more choices over that than we might know. You might think, well, I gotta go here. But really thinking about where you work well, right? Yeah.
So I'm a little bit more of a workaholic than most, I suppose. I work like 12, 15 hours a day normally. But I always take time off Friday or Saturday or Sunday because I absolutely need that time. First to like turn off my brain, as well as I'm also first generation in the United States, so I need to spend time with my family. And because I'm working 24 hours a day or whatever during the week, they sort of feel left out or they have difficulty understanding that. So you need to sort of budget time. And then additionally, the where is extremely important. For me, it's usually just out of the house, because if I'm out of the house, I'm not in my PJs, right? Or Netflix isn't as accessible. So that usually helps me.
Sometimes the where is the external thing that Professor Oishi was talking about, the external, in this case, maybe not a motivator, but a supporter of your work. Where you go makes a difference.
It's a signal almost, it's like, all right, I'm in this space, now it's time to.
Yeah, so the where becomes part of the routine and the ritual. I go here, I set my stuff up, and I click into the whole process of, I used to have trouble sleeping, and the doctor said, okay, you need to improve your sleep hygiene. And I was like, what? Sleep hygiene? And he said, what do you do before bed? I said, various things, and then I go to bed. I said, no, you need to have a process like a airlock. You leave life, and you're supposed to go to bed, but what do you do in between? What is that process that gets you into the frame of mind to sleep? I can tell you it works. That really works also for any work you want to do. Is there kind of a ritual? You go to this place at a certain time, you do certain things, you get your coffee, you sit down. Coffee before you go to bed? No. This happened to me as a graduate student. I can have coffee and I can go to sleep. It doesn't work anymore. I'm immune. But yeah, the where is really important. You had some other comments at the back? Yeah.
I have a question for the group.
Okay.
What do you do in situations where you're not only working on your own research, but then you're also working with faculty as well and doing this collaborative research that gets to this position of sometimes cognitive overload, and then also the conflict that happens between your own work and then wanting to do contribute to this other work, which is just as meaningful to your professional development that we were talking about earlier. So how do we reconcile, or how do people reconcile that?
Is anybody else in that has experienced this and want to share what you do?
No, we already
You have a question. Okay.
So I have a really intensive sort of RA shift where I'm working on 2 papers with a professor as well as taking a lot of classes and doing my own research. I usually just try to get his stuff out of the way as fast as possible. I still do it all very professionally, of course. Then that gives me sort of my time to do things. Or I try and give him the reply when I know he's going to be a little bit busy. Because it's going to take him a little bit longer than to respond. And that gives me more time to work on my own things.
And I think it comes back to, in all these ideas here, which are connected, the core is this routine and your ritual. And what various people have said in different ways, know that that you are a student and that your work is important. It's what Professor Azam said about it's not urgent, but it's critically important. So how do you put that in the middle? That's your question, right? You have all these other things which you are doing that are good for you. One of the things that our faculty are very good at is when you have that, as Manny was saying, a difficult conversation with them. They want you to do the research because it's moving their work forward too, but they don't want you to screw up. And having that difficult conversation, I was in a lab for 4 years when I was a student here, and I got to the point of having to have the difficult conversation. And I was really surprised at how well it went. I think it's our fear. We're afraid to go and tell them because it seems to be a judgment on ourselves. But I do really think that we judge ourselves much, much more than they will ever judge us. Now, so a few hands going up in response to that. Can we? Yeah. Oh, let's go over there and then we'll come back.
I'm judging 3 projects. One is studying for my PhD, and 2 are kind of like case maybe stats something I might call them. And I found that the best thing is to just like do the same thing each week. So Monday I do this project, and then Tuesday I do my work, and on Friday I do this
Back to
project.
routine.
And that way I know that I'm moving on each one of them. And I also find that like the rhythm of when people expect things, they usually expect them back. And like if they give you something, they probably want it back in about 2 weeks. And that way I can get like 2 chunks of work in, and that's probably enough to make a little bit of progress. So that's kind of how I'm balancing it a little bit, is I know that, you know, if it's Wednesday and I'm working on that project on Friday and it comes out of my mind, I can be like, no, I'm worried about it Friday, I'm doing this right now. And that way it just keeps things in their place and still moving a little bit.
And what you're saying reminds me again of this morning when we talk about set your appointments, set your deadlines. So you're in a lab or you're in a discussion with faculty and you're doing all these things, this has to get done. Start putting deadlines on things that you can manage. And that begins the conversation of, well, but we need it next week. So, well, I'm doing this and this. And it's a negotiation. Won't always go your way, but if you start doing it, it'll go your way more often than you think. And it's very hard.
I want to make a connection to the first speaker when we talked about family, because that's huge. If I connect it to what the second speaker also said, routine. If your family knows your routine, it will make it a lot easier. Because I know that I have family, I have my husband, and so on. They tell me, as long as I'm in this program, we are kind of divorced. Otherwise, this is not going to work for me. Well, I'm going to make an agenda, a routine. At this time, I'll be home. At this time, you will not see. So, if you don't have that routine, for those of us who have family, and for those of us who have the Latino connection, it's the same thing like the African connection. If you don't make the routine the agenda for family and school,
I think that you're absolutely right. And the other thing is, I do want to say we do need to make sure that we meet, you know, all of our responsibilities and everything we've taken on. There's a lot of projects we take on, but don't forget, those other projects are not going to help. I mean, they help, right? But they're not going to help you graduate. And what I mean by that is your stuff has to come first. This was really hard for me because I like making people happy. And I mean, I do. Like, if somebody depends on me, like, I take it personally. Like, it is going to get done, you know? And that was part of the problem I had when I first finished coursework, is that I routinely put other people's things first. And I was scared of, like, oh man, if I don't get that deadline, they're going to be upset with me. They're going to be, you know, and it has to be really great work because I need to impress them and everything else. And that's true to a point. You have to put your stuff first or you're not going to make progress. And I'm not saying don't work on those other things. They are important. You have to guard your own stuff because ultimately that is what's going to get you a PhD and that is what's going to help you get your career. Like, so work the other stuff in for sure, but make sure it is an absolute priority because I didn't for a while and that was part of the big problem. Okay.
I think what daughter and I, when she was in high school, went to the library together. She studied, I studied. An autistic teenager can understand school. He has to go to school. He has to do homework. I had to start trusting that my husband really thought that what I was valuable, what I was doing was valuable. Even if he couldn't understand my papers, he would often read them, right? Check out a few typos, that kind of thing. And what you were saying before, I'm sitting here because I asked for the day off in a month when I need to take 4 days off. One here, one because I want to come to our graduate conference 2 weeks from now, and 2 days because they want to send me on another conference. And I was afraid, but a couple years ago I started saying, I need to leave one day a week at 2 o'clock because I'm not going to get through this if I can't at least get to class by 4. And you don't get if you don't ask. But I will only be the third person on a faculty of 120 to get a PhD, and the only one at a Catholic school with a PhD in religious studies. Okay, so that they became invested, right? They became invested in me, and they're all rooting for me. And sometimes it's annoying, and sometimes I'm annoying them, right? But it keeps me centered because I want to achieve, not just for myself, but out of gratitude for everything I've been given. And they understand, I won't say we're divorced, but there's sometimes I'll say, this paper's due, I'm dead to you this weekend. I'll actually, we schedule it. Who's gonna do this with my son so I can spend, I can't do so many hours every single day, but I can schedule it every single week, right? But if I negotiate that with every stakeholder, I get it done. I hope that helps, and that wasn't too long-winded.
No, not at all, because you reiterated this thing about asking and inviting. I think that's very powerful with family, with friends, with faculty. Tell your story, because faculty may not know how busy you are. So when you tell them and say, but I still want to do this work with you, you work out a way to do it. I think that's really, really important. Over there and then. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question. What happens when your career, which in my case was a very big part of why I went to graduate school, because I want to advance in a particular career. What if you're at the point where the career advancement you have is making it impossible now for you to get on a ritual or routine?
Yeah.
But you absolutely love the career because that's what you went to school for.
Yeah.
And so now you're almost, in a way, losing the incentive to finish because you're like, wow, I'm going on this trajectory and I'm actually exceeded where I wanted to be at by this time. But now I can't finish this thing because I have no time. I'm working 40+ hours a week. I'm on business travel all the time. I have a really long commute. Other people probably experience that too. So what do you do then? How do you keep motivated, and how do you try to create some kind of routine in a schedule that really has none anyway?
Okay, that's a big one, right? But here's what's happening if you unpack that a little bit. You have a career, and this is what you want to do. Your PhD is not going to be a factor anymore. It stopped playing its role.
Yeah.
But if it's there and it's unfinished, it's like a thing that follows you, right? That's motivation enough that you want to get rid of this load. Finding the space and the time, that's a challenge. But there is this slide on it later. But there is this thing about how do you eat an elephant? A little bit at a time, one bite at a time. And so it may not be 3 hours a day every day. It might be 1 week in a month. Right? So some people come to boot camp, the dissertation writing boot camp, and that's the only time in the month they do it. But the consistency, I think that's the routine or ritual. The frequency of it is challenging. But even if it's far apart, it's a routine or ritual, right? That you go and you do something at a regular rate. So yes, you might have to accept that this thing is going to take a lot longer because your career just took off. But you finish it. Or you get to the point where you say, do I part company? That's very hard you've invested so much, and you shook your head, no. It's still, that means it's still meaningful to you. Sometimes asking that question, should I just stop? You know, it's like flipping a coin. Have you ever done that? I need to cut my hair. Should I cut my hair? You flip a coin, you say, heads, I cut my hair, tails, I grow it long. And it comes out tails, and you go, grow it long, and you go, darn, I wish it'd come up heads. Then you've suddenly discovered what you truly want, right? Before you flip the coin, you were ambivalent. So sometimes asking the question, actually periodically asking the question, what does this mean to me? Can I drop it? And you'll find a very, visceral response to that means in no way. Right? So then your task is, how do I eat this elephant? And your little by little could be that. But the principles, take those principles, right? How can I chunk it? Where can I do it? When can I do it? And then the difficult conversation, ask. At work, like, I need to finish this because otherwise it's going to hang over me. And you want me to move fast, so give me a bit of time off. Talk to faculty, come to a different arrangement. But once you do that, once you start doing one or two things like this, you'll find that you get traction. And then you'll feel that you're moving. I think the thing that stops us is when we don't feel movement.
Yeah.
It just seems to be dead in the water.
Or something that happens to me is that the lack of progress actually breeds more procrastination, which breeds more lack of progress, and then I get to a point where you feel like, okay, because this has taken longer, it needs to be really, really good when it's done to justify the extra time that you've taken, and it just becomes so overwhelming. Like it just becomes a more and more horrible monster the more that you don't look at it. Yeah.
The elephant is growing.
Yeah, the elephant turns into like a dinosaur when you're.
We feed it with our guilt.
Yes,
We feed it with that, right? And we shouldn't. Yeah.
So I think I'd like to echo it. I guess a couple aspects. One is that you have to know yourself, and you want to be in a place that's manual, but might not be the most comfortable, but you're going to be productive and feasible. And for some people, they go into all studying, and they just do study, and then they do research. Some people can't do research alone. They need to wake up, do a class, teach one class, and then do research, so that I keep acting. So it kind of depends on what works for you. What works for me is kind of always be at I sleep and I'm dead. So I take a lot of stuff. If I have free time, I'm gonna fill it up with more stuff, and that's the way that keeps me very sharp. Because if you're say during summer vacation and you come back, your resistance, your stamina is gonna go down, and you need to have in mind that whatever plan you're doing and executing has a timeline and horizon. It's not forever, so you can do it maybe some studios put a high effort for 1 semester. It's just 1 semester, but you will get really far ahead. So if you can just plan it just the same. Every time I have a meeting, I put it on my calendar. I can see what I have to do, and I just try to meet every goal. And as long as I keep adding more goals, at the end I'm whoa, I'm being really productive because I'm getting better at what I'm doing, and that's a part of taking classes and everything. The stuff that you're going to be doing is going to be more complex, it's going to be more harder, it's going to demand more of you, but you're also getting better. So it's kind of this whole learning process where, yeah, first semester you're managing 3 classes, by the end you're writing a dissertation and a couple of papers and whatnot. So it's that fine-tuning, I guess, scaffolding your way where you start taking more
He's come
stuff.
to PFF workshops.
Exactly. And at the end, without realizing it, you're much more productive. You're handling much better all the pressure, and at the end it's oh, I'm done. So.
Right. So you need to trust the process, because that's absolutely right. You do build stamina, and by putting in these structures, you are scaffolding yourself. Your cognitive stamina will increase. Your physical stamina will increase. Your emotional stamina will increase. Yeah.
Something that I had to figure out early on in my quals process, I'm about halfway through, I would estimate, once I figured out the when and the where, the how was the bigger question for me. As an undergrad, I was that student who made note cards and studied with note cards. And I know it seems kind of ridiculous to have that for qualifying exams given how big this process is, but I found, at least at this stage right now, that those note cards are actually helping me write questions because I'm able to relate back, like this scholar speaks to this scholar. And I mean, everybody's process and requirements for quals are going to be different. So maybe some faculty members don't want you to write questions, or maybe it's just a very different dynamic, but at least in the program that I am in, that is an option to do, and to really work with the faculty on the kind of questions you're going to be asked. What you get on the test is probably going to be the bigger question, but at least in that process, writing my own questions has also helped me study in another way. So the when, the where is important, but also knowing yourself. I know that sounds kind of intuitive, but at first I was just thinking, why the note cards? But it works for me, and I have a zillion note cards, but it works. So to not question so much what works for you, and to continue doing that.
So you've added how to this, when, where, and how are you going to do it? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the flip side of being, super busy. Most of us, I guess, are type A personalities who would be in a PhD program, very goal-directed, very goal-driven. Sometimes it's just impossible. I had a new job, and I started in the fall, and then that spring I had a new job that I went out and gotten because it didn't require me to travel as much as I was in my old job. So that was it, but it was new, right? So I had to really focus on that. Plus I was having trouble in my marriage, and I really needed to focus on that because I wanted to save my marriage, which we did. So I took a leave of absence. And so a lot of people may not think that's a really good solution because, the danger of doing that is that you're not going to come back, right? But I was, very goal-directed to get this done, and that was my plan. I said, I'm just going to take a leave of absence for this semester because I just can't handle it. And admitting that to yourself that you aren't superhuman and you can't take that all on necessarily is a good step. And then I rolled back in summer quarter. Fortunately, one of the courses I wanted to take was being offered in the summer, and went right back to it. So, and that's exactly what my boss needed. That's exactly what my wife needed. And that worked for me.
And that's taking care, that's a self-care piece. And there are very strategic ways to do that. If you do want to take the time off, or maybe not a formal leave of absence, but you need some time, tell your faculty, work out a plan, make sure they know, don't just disappear. I think that's when you give yourself permission to never come back. But if other people are invested in you coming back, invested in you taking that time off, you can structure that time so that you come back really strong. And you might actually move faster as a result than if you're trying to struggle through. So it comes back to know yourself. Right? What is it you need? Christine talked about doing a self-assessment. This is really an important thing to do, not just for planning your career, but for finishing this process. Who are you as a scholar, and how do you work as a scholar? Okay. I'm going to just share a couple of things, if my slides will let me. So you met this in the morning, the little piece of your dissertation, and you know there's so many other things. Well, we've just talked about, and I hope you're seeing strategies that will help you do all of those things. So we had some questions about what if you're working with faculty, what if you're working with your peers, what if you're trying to plan your career with Christine's office, what if you are trying to do a job. You have all of these things to play with. And this is some of the implications of what we've been talking about, right? Trying to manage. But I think, look at the whiteboard, I've just been taking notes of key things you're saying, right? Given their stories, given your comments, your questions, and your sharing of your own strategies, I think you're trying to find this balance. Yes. Much better, right? Than that one. But, I looked at this picture and I thought I'd share some pictures with you because we've just had a lot of words, right? And maybe these pictures will kind of help you encapsulate something. Here's one kind of balance. But, you know, to some extent, our PhD isn't like this. It's not so peaceful. Maybe it's more like this. An active balance. Think about that, because sometimes you have this preconception in your mind of wanting this peace, but this is peace too, of different kinds. Very active, it's very agile. And if you go back to this, maybe this, and the qualities of this, tightrope walking, I got that from somebody I talked to at CGU who said, yeah, doing my PhD is like walking a tightrope. You know when you're going to fall off. But if you think of the qualities that get these people to do these things, you've talked about it today. You have to be proactive, right? Plan, ritual. You have to be rehearsed, practice, do it again and again and again. Like I said, you build stamina for it, you build strength. You have to be intentional. You have to know what you want and do it. And you have to be agile. You have to be flexible. We talked about 3-hour chunks or 45-minute chunks. Once a week, once a month, every day. What kind of pattern works for you? So, now, I didn't hear the stories. I didn't hear your comments, but I wanted to share these 4 things with you. And I think we've talked about all of these before. Refocus. Make the PhD process your work. Prioritize it. It's your work. Redefine. Build your identity as a scholar. You really got a lot of that this morning. Don't just do your studies and your dissertation and just be the student, because you're no longer a student, you're a scholar. And that's the difference from leaving coursework and entering this phase. The more you know who you are as a scholar, the more you know what's important to you, the easier it is to ask for time, the easier it is to prioritize your deep work. If you have this real self-identity that what I do is important to me and what I do is important to the world. It's really, really important. And then the tactics, restructure. I think we got a lot of that today. Find smart processes, right? And restore. It's interesting how so many people spoke about well-being. It's something that we're not very good at. I don't know whether, which hypothesis is right. People who don't look after themselves don't take a PhD, or do you stop looking after yourself because you're in a PhD program? I don't know which one is right. But these are related, right? They're not separate like this, they're really like this. Each one feeds the other. If you're taking care of yourself, you're much able to restructure your time. If you're restructuring your time, you can take care of yourself. They feed each other. Okay, this one I want to come back to because I think it's a mindset, right? I'm a PhD candidate who also does A, B, and C. Or I am A, B, and C, and I'm also a PhD candidate. Where the first one puts the PhD work squarely in the middle. I'm a PhD candidate, and I have a family, and I work, and I volunteer, and etc., etc., etc. It's your identity, and believe me, it'll make a difference. Shift it in your head. Which one do you say to yourself? Good. That's what you should be saying, right? And then when you feel guilty, you say, I am a parent who's also a PhD candidate. And it's natural. Of course you're going to flip between the two, but remembering to come back to, I am a PhD candidate. Someone said right at the start, you have to remember we're students. And get rid of the word students. We have to remember we're scholars. Yes. Right? And that we are doing something to try to bring that work out into the world. So some of the things that, I think we've answered many of these questions, but just take a look. This is the nuts and bolts part. The first two points were about identity. Now we get into the nuts and bolts. Who are my resources? Not just what are my resources, who are they? Who will protect my time and energy? I was really interested to hear how so many people use the word protect and defend. Right? It's true. because it's this thing you care about, and you're looking after it and nurturing it, and you want to protect it. So who's going to help you do that? Because it's really hard to do it by yourself. If you do not tell your story, keep telling your story. Let people know. Our professors might look at us and say, you seem to be fine, and like Shelby says, how's it going? Oh, great. Right? They need to know, and it's the vulnerability thing. Can we tell them? Can we let on how messy it is? I think from this morning, you realize that for the most part you can. Because they'll understand. They are always there themselves. One of my sources of structure, we talked of when and where, time and space. Now, some of the things we talked about won't immediately answer your questions, because if you've been struggling with this, our session is not going to finish the job for you, right? But you want to take this away and really devote some time to it. Now, the other three things are really important. Who holds you accountable? Who can hold me accountable, apart from me? Tom Lushai talked about it this morning, and I think it came up in subtle ways here. Sometimes, and I wrote it down as turn barriers into strengths. Your children will hold you accountable. Not because they're going to ask you whether you've done your work, but because they need your time. And suddenly your time is so precious, you are smarter with it. You give them the time, so you stop doing the other things. Right? When Tom Lushai's daughter was born, suddenly he became more productive. Ironic, right? The more you crowd in sometimes, the more focused you become. It's like writing poetry. We give you a big blank white sheet of paper and say, write a poem. It's a bit scary. But if I say a poem needs to have 5 lines and each line needs to have 4 syllables, you have some traction, right? The limitations focus you and actually make you very productive. How do I set accountability checkpoints for myself? That's a big one to take away, right? If you want to be accountable and you can get people to invest in you, how do you set accountability checkpoints? You say to your boss, I need 1 day off a week, but I'll be done with my PhD at this time. It's scary. You're promising something. Set it, because you push yourself to that deadline. And then restorations. What restores my energy? I like Shelby's point about it's not just relaxation. I picked that word very intentionally, not relax, restore. You also need to relax, but you must find restoration. Where does your energy come back? What is it for you? Swimming, walking, usually something physical, but I don't want to make that a thing that you must do. You find it for yourself, right? Meditation, painting, singing, many things that we've given up because we've become PhD students. I used to paint, and when I was doing my PhD, I said I had an AD list called after dissertation, and everything went on the AD list. I got sick. I took a few things back out of it, like painting, and interestingly, by putting it back into my life, I found more time for my studies. It happens. So what reminds me why I'm doing this? That poll, should you want to give it up? No, right? What reminds me why I'm doing this? Who reminds me why I'm doing this? Do you think about it from time to time? Because it's such a long process that you get lost in the small little things. You forget the big picture. You forget the excitement. Doesn't it become a grind? Right? But there was a moment when you had that decision, I'm going to do this thing, this PhD. So how do you find, again, the excitement of what you're doing? Working with a group, often you talk about ideas and you get excited all over again. Yes, this is why I'm doing this. Someone said, Manny talked about being a role model for his students. That reminds him, to some extent, why he's doing this. Because this is going to be something for his students too. And what brings you to this? You can't do this if you're all turbulent inside. These slides will be up, as we say, next week on the reorientation website. So if you want this checklist to keep and think about and work with, here's the elephant. Just to remind you that it is a process and you don't just follow it whole. You either an elephant a bit at a time. We do still have we have some time for questions if you have any. Other thoughts, other questions. And I have a little task I want to take like 10 minutes at the end to do. So we have about 5 minutes more of any other questions or comments. Yes?
You elaborate a little bit more on accountability checkpoints and
Okay.
examples or other.
Accountability checkpoints, good one. They can be as simple as deadlines, right? It doesn't have to be a deliverable to a professor. It can be a deadline you set to complete a certain part of a task. Say data analysis, I will by the end of the week have done such and such. Now, one of the best ways for accountability checkpoints to work, if you set it all by yourself, in your little world, isolated, you know what will happen? The day will come and you'll say, oh, I think I'll just move the checkpoints a little bit, right? So you need to involve other people in this. Getting together with a group. At the end of this, when you do the feedback survey, I'm going to make my voice very still. You will all do the feedback survey. We'll email you the link. Please do it, because at the end of the survey, we will ask you, would you like to form a group? And if anyone's interested, we'll try and help you facilitate that process. The group doesn't have to be on campus, it can be virtual, but a group. And these are some of the groups can help you do that. Accountability checkpoints are also what the lady at the back was saying. I know to her husband, I'm not available at this time, but I am available at this time. Your barriers can form very good accountability checkpoints for you. If you have children, friends, family who need your time, then you schedule that time and you schedule stuff to finish before you need to give them that time. Accountability checkpoints can come from your work life. You negotiate something at work. I'm going to take this Friday off, so you need to get a lot of work done this Friday. And you can have a colleague or your boss, a supervisor, somebody at work be your accountability person. So finding someone. I think one of the hardest things to do is we're so used to going it alone. It's a lonely process, PhD, especially once you get out of coursework. And because of this guilt thing, we feel we must do it alone. But involving people, and I really suffered from that problem when I was a student. Right through undergrad, I was one of those students. I just did it on my own. But I couldn't do it here with the PhD. And it was finding a community of people who I could call on, and they would call on me. We were that for each other. I can't stress how important it is to have at least one other person with whom you're journeying. You might be at very different stages of the process, but the process you both understand. So find that group and use that group and have these conversations. A great person for accountability checkpoints is your faculty advisor. You can say, you don't have to read it, but I'd like you to just glance over it. Can I email you something and set up a schedule? So just like setting up and scheduling your meetings ahead of time, one of the best pieces of advice I got was, if you see your faculty advisor, see your dissertation chair, set the date for the next meeting before you walk out the room. Because it's really hard sometimes, right, to schedule the meetings. But I did that with my work too. So I'll send you a paragraph, I'll send you 5 pages, I'll send you a chapter, I'll send you half a chapter. And that, they're expecting it. And because we really don't want to let them down, if you have someone like that, you can use. So there are multiple ways you can get your accountability checkpoint to help you. Setting them for yourself is a harder one, right? But there are many things you can do. Apps you can use. See, these are things that may or may not work depending on your level of honesty and self-control, right? I will not eat the bar of chocolate and then go, well, I'll have a So, if you set deadlines for yourself, you calendar it, and I'll share one thing that happened when I was consulting before I did my PhD. I gave up all my time. Someone would call and say, hey, can you meet Tuesday afternoon at 2? And up pops my little schedule on the computer and go, yeah, it looks open, I'll meet you. And then before you know it, the whole week is full. And I got really sick. And my husband said, come on, why don't you schedule some time with yourself? Because in the quick split-second reaction, let me check my schedule, it looks full. But those were times booked for me. Right? So are you doing that? That's a kind of an accountability checkpoint for yourself too. Are you scheduling time for yourself? It goes back to what we talked about with ritual and routine, right? Have you put the time in, and can you plan ahead? But going back to that image I had of the dancer and the tightrope walker, can you be agile about it? Because if you don't, and something happens, you start feeling guilty, right? You have to balance that. It's this sort of agile balance. Yeah, got a question at the back? Or comment?
Yeah, scheduling and rituals works a lot of the time for me, but sometimes I feel like it takes the joy out of everything. Like if you're scheduling in your like fun things, isn't really fun anymore. And if you're scheduling in your PhD work, which you're supposed to be passionate about, so then it sort of loses the passion.
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing it up. So, let's nuance that a little. Yes, if everything is on a timetable, 7 o'clock, eat breakfast, 8 o'clock, sit down and write 2 hours, 10 o'clock, yeah, the joy can go out of it. It's those moments outside. Like Shelby says, she shuts down on Friday and the weekend is over. You don't schedule. That's for people, and you do that. It doesn't mean if you schedule yourself, you can't have spontaneity. So you leave room for that. And it sounds very paradoxical. You're trying to schedule things and allow flow and so on. But the beginning of, and I struggle with that because I do like to I want to paint a picture. It's hard at the beginning, but it's a stamina thing. So if you go it long enough, right, at first it's mechanical because you're not used to it. You sit down to write. You have a little bit more sort of self-enforcement. Once it becomes, the difference between routine, ritual, and scheduling is that this becomes more flexible. It becomes more, not spontaneous, but it becomes more habitual. Just like I love to walk every morning. And one of my habits was, no matter how I felt, I just felt good if I went out for a long, long walk early in the morning. It's just something I did. It seems mechanical. Every morning at 6:30, she's out. My neighbors could set their clocks by me. I'd be out on my walk. But to me, it wasn't. It was the thing that got me feeling good. So if your routines and rituals can feel good, and like Shelby said, they'll start to feel really good if you do deep work. You won't think of it as an imposition. I think what you're getting at is when you impose that, there is no joy. But if you can cultivate it, there can be a lot of freedom and a lot of joy because the rest of your space and time opens up. Again, it doesn't happen overnight. It is a habit to build. So maybe the better word here, rather than routine and ritual, which might sound like an imposition, is can we build habits? What kind of habits can we build? Yeah.
This is going along with that. I was really struggling with this, and I started I literally got those stickers, like star stickers when I was in grade school, and I put them on, it would schedule a block of time, like at 1 p.m. every day, and I would have one task that I was going to do, whether it was read this article, type of notes on it. And that was all, and like nothing else. I wouldn't have a long list of things, it was just that one thing related to my exam prep. And if I did that, then I put a star sticker on my planner. Okay. And then after a week, and then I could see, oh, I got 6 stickers this week. It sounds really juvenile, but
it works.
But I was also rewarding myself like $5 per sticker. that I could spend on whatever that weekend. So like, and so once I started doing that though, like my motivation started to change because I recognized what I was actually, that I was enjoying that routine. I was starting to feel like I could see the difference it was making in my studying and in my concentration. And so it became its own reward. And so, but the stickers was a good way, like a visual reminder of, look, I did something that I was putting off and procrastinating.
Right.
And I could see that I was doing it.
Yeah,
so.
and you were scaffolding yourself into a certain habit. And then after a while, you don't need the training wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really important, that idea of, we don't complain about, maybe we should actually, the lack of joy in the routine, ritual, scheduled, automatized things we have to do when we work, right? But you're really preparing for something for your life. If you are going to do this, it doesn't end when you finish your dissertation. You get a job, faculty, you want to research, you want to publish, you want to teach. You saw the pictures earlier this morning. It's a balancing act, which is why I like the tightrope walker. Because imagine a tightrope walker who's so skilled, or a dancer. It's beautiful. But think of the training they had to go. Repeat, right? Ballet turnout, 45 degrees, no more, no less. And that was hard, and it was repetitive, and it could have been boring. But the payoff is that amazing ability, right? So keep that in mind. I'd like you to, before you leave, actually respond to these questions, because it's really easy. We're here, we crowdsource a wonderful lot of ideas, and then you go home and life could go back to like the same old thing, right? So I'd like you to walk out with something very concrete, especially number 2. What 3 strategies can you implement immediately? And so be very realistic about this. Everyone wears a different size shoes, so pick and choose and modify to improve your PhD process. And then what 3 strategies do you wish to implement but will need help to do so? And who can you reach out to? That who is really important. Right? Name some people before you walk out of this room. Right? Who can you reach out to? If you'd like to continue the conversation, come and talk to us at the SSC. This is something, and really, after this reorientation, it would be very, very good for you, having had this whole day, to make an appointment with your advisor. So I heard all this at reorientation, right? Talk to them. They all know you are here. I mean, they know today's happening. All the faculty know. They're excited. They support this event. We have faculty here this morning. They want to help. Reach out to them. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do this, and and then we can go, but can we, round of applause for our panelists?